This is Gemara Horayos, Daf Tes, and we're holding the bottom of Ches Amid Beis, and we like all the learning for this month. The month of Elul has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, an incredible schos to be able to be learning together each and every day. As the schos Aliyas Neshama of Aster Reyzel Basar Meir, the incredible Kayach HaTaira of so many people, Baruch Hashem, learning difficult Daf Gemara should bring the Neshama of Aster Reyzel Basar Meir to an incredible place in Gan Eden Shal Ma'ila. Holding on the bottom of Chesed and Beis at the Mishnah, and the Mishnah continues different cases, different Averos, and the Karbanos that ensue with them. Over here, we're going to be talking about cases which Bezdin does not bring a Karban. Ein Chayavim. The Bezdin is not Chayiv al Shemias Kol, for hearing the voice, Val Bitoy Sifasayim, and for being over a shvua, val Thomas mikdash v'kadashav, v'hanasi keyetzbem, divrei Rabbi Yosef Glili, and a nasi is the same. That he's also potter if any of these averos were transgressed. Shitas Rabbi Yosef Glili. Rabbi Kiva Omer, a nasi chayiv b'kulam. The nasi is yes chayiv chotz mishmias kol, except for the case of shmias kol. Why? Shamelech loidan v'loidan naisai. Cause the melech does not get judged, nor does he judge. V'loi meid v'loi meidin naisai. Nor does he testify, nor do we testify about him, and therefore there'd be no obligation in such a case. This really brings us back to Gemara's in Sanhedrin about the incredible power and esteem that the melech must have, that he doesn't get involved in the Bezdin at all. Says the Gemara, Amar Ulam. My time there basically. What's using basically? He says in all these cases, Bezdin and the Nasi is the Chayiv Amar Kra. He quotes a pasuk. And it'll be one of these. One is guilty regarding one of these. Kol shemachayiv achas mischayiv kulam. Shein mischayiv v'achas, eno mischayiv v'kulam. You only chayiv if you're chayiv. Chayiv one, you're chayiv in all. If you're not chayiv one, you're not chayiv in all. So says the Gemara, why? Ve'im mischayiv achas ve'en afal bi shein mischayiv v'kulam. Who says the two are independent upon each other? Elatem derbe seklili me'ach on the last line. Ditan yoyer Rabbi Yirmiyah Mer. Teaches Rabbi Yirmiyah Nemar. As we turn over to Tes Amid Aleph, says in the Torah, Leisiga Yodoi, that if he doesn't have enough money, V'nemar. And similarly, it says, Leisasig Yodoi. So two psukim teaching us very similar terminologies. In the Gemara Darshins, Misha Baladeaniyas Vashiros. From here we see it's only one that could be within the parsha of Leisasig Yodoi, that he could potentially be an ani or an ashir. Yatzin Nasi Mashiach Shein Bayin Lideaniyas. And Nasi or the Kohen Mashiach can never come to Aniyos as they are supported by Klal Yisrael. And therefore, how do we know that? Nasi Dechsev Vasa Achas, we call mitzvahs Hashem Eleikav. And Nasi, if he doesn't have it, transgressing one of the mitzvahs. Mishein al Gabav Elo Hashem Eleikav. This is only a person, the only person to have it is Hashem Eleikav. And a Nasi is such, and therefore a Nasi can never be one that will be poor, and therefore he's not included in this pasuk. If you look at Rashi, the Mefarish, on the third wide line, he explains a Nasi she'ein hagav shavadam el Hashem, hainu melech u'melech olam ashiru. So that's the proof that the Nasi is an Asher, will never be poor. Mashiach t'chsev ha'koyin ha'gadol me'echav. The koyin has to be greater than his brothers. Shu gadol me'echav. He has to be greater than his brothers. In what ways? Binay, in beauty, b'koyach, in strength, u'b'chachma, in wisdom, u'b'ayisher, and in wealth. So what do we see? We see that the koyin similarly will never be poor. Acher ma'imrim. Another pshat. Minayim she'im ein loy gadleu mishalachav. How do we know that if the Kohen Mashiach does not have money, they should give him wealth by giving him money from others? Al Roi Shai, and from here we darshan Gadalehu Me'achav, he should become great from his brothers. So says the Gemara, so that's what we see, that only if one is within Leisasig Sagir Yadai will we bring these karbanos, which excludes the Nasi and the Kayin Mashuach. About 12 lines down, the first one line is Minei. Fregs Ravina Shailo. Nasi Shenitztara Mau. A Nasi that has Saras. What is the halacha? Midchi Dachi or Miftar Patir? Do we say that even though right now he's not fit to be a melech, he's not fit to be a nasi, he's still pushed away? Or do we say, no, it just suspends him, and therefore, when he eventually is able to be back in office, then he'll, have to bring the carbon. Amar Lei, so responds, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Tilach oy de Gaza. Are you asking that he should pay from his own monies, or that he should pay from the Beis HaMikdash? Of course, it would be from his own money. And since we see that he'll never lose his cash, therefore it must be that he'll have a real full-fledged patur and he'll never have to bring these karbanis. Says the Gemara Tanya, let's continue this discussion of the level of obligation that the Nasi, the Kayin Mashuach, potentially is going to have. Rabbi Akiva Imer Mashiach Pater Mikulam, the Kayin Mashuach is Pater from the Chatas in all these cases. The three Averis that generally you bring carbon oil of the Yared, he's going to be Pater. As we look down at the Mefarish, who spells in the dot, Tanya Rabbi Akiva Imer Mashiach Pater Mikulam, be carbon oil of the Yared. Techsev Zekarban Aranu Banav Yom Mashachai Sai. Asirus Eifa, Dainu Chavit Kayin Mashiach, the Chavit in Baal Loi Chayva, Vein Achares Baal Loi. The Asirus Eifa, Oil V'Yared, Loi Baal Loi Chayva, Helka Pater Mikula Mi'er V'Yared. So where do we know? Rav Akiva says the Kayin Mashiach. It's Pater from these three cases. Amarav Maitem Rav Akiva, Amarkra, Zeh, Karaban Arnu Banav. This is going to be chayv alay. This is the only case that he has the chiyuv and not others. Ask Gemara, maybe when the Torah excludes the Karim Mashuach, it just means doesn't have to bring the poor of the poor. And what does it mean? The Asira Seifa. But maybe one step higher, a regular ani or even an usher, he's not excluded. Maybe loy miyata rachmana. Maybe he's only excluded from mamish, poor of the poor. Responds the Gemara, loy salkadaitach. Don't think this. Says the Torah, v'chibur lavakoinal chatas asher chata me'achas me'ila hamischaper ba'achas mischaper v'kulon. Similar as we started off the day, that the only time you can have a carbon is all or none. El Meyata asked the Gemara to say, why don't we say the Mischai v'achas v'kulam shen Mischai v'achas ein Mischai v'kulam? And what's the problem? The problem is Alama Tanan. Why do we learn that Rabbi Akiva Omer Nasi is yes chayev chutz mishmias kol? So we clearly see is that all or none. Explains the Gemara, me'achas mashmalei le'achas loy mashmalei. Two different psukim. Me'achas would indeed prove this, but not le'achas. Ask the Gemara, ma'ishana me'achas to mashmalei. The kasvei rachman alib saif gabi asir saifa. Le'meimar dechol mechayv asir saifa mechayv kulam. This zagadayt mischayv achas. We don't only chayv in one. After mischayv kulam nechtavei lahai me'achas me'ile. Bedalos inami bashiros. In fact, Torah doesn't say that. There we see that's not the way to learn the pasuk, and that's going to be the chiyuvim of the karbanais of the nasi of the kayin mashuach. Says the Gemara, and that's klapi the carbon oil of yared, the carbon kaila. The carbon that varies. Depending on one's wealth. Says the Mishnah, Kol ha-mitzvah Shabbat Torah, shechayav and alzon and karz shegoz lechatos, any mitzvah that if you violate it on purpose, you get kares. If it's a mistake, there's a carbon chatas. Hayachid maybe kisvos iram. Then if a yachid violates such, what does he bring? He brings a kesev, kisva, female lamb, or a seira. Vanasi brings a sayer. Mashuach ubezdin mevi'in par. Those are the categories of all their chiyuvin, ubavidas kachavim. And if the avir at hand is avodah zara, then hayachid v'nasi v'mashiach mevi'in sira. Ubezdin par v'sayer, par loyla v'sayer lechatas. End of part A of the Mishnah. Asham taloi continues the Mishnah. What about regarding an asham taloi? Taloi means hanging. Taloi means questionable asham. Hayachid v'nasi chayavin. The yachid, a singular person in nasi, are going to be obligated. Mashiach ubezdin are going to be pturim. Asham vadi. That's an asham taloi. If you're not sure, asham vadai hayachid v'nasi v'mashiach chayavin. Ubezdin paturin. Al shmias kol v'albita isvayim al tumas mikdash ukadashav. Concludes the Mishnah on the three cases of the carbon oil of Yeri, like we saw in the previous Mishnah. Shmias kol gitus v'asayim al tumas mikdash ukadashav. Bezdin are paturin. V'yach v'nasim mashiach chayavim. Elo she'ein kohen gadol mashiach chayav al tumas mikdash ukadashav. David Rabbi Shimon. Shimon says no, the kohen gadol is excluded from tumas mikdash ukadashav. Ma'in mevien. Carbon oil of Yared. Rav Lazar Ranasi maybe doesn't bring oil of Yared, but rather he brings a Sa'ir. Says the Gemara, let's dive into Shitas Rebbe Shimon. Tanya, we learned in our Brayso, so then to the narrow lines of Tesamid Aleph. Rebbe Shimon Ayanaisin Klal. Rebbe Shimon gave a Klal general rule. Anytime a singular person will bring the asham that is hanging the questionable asham, and asik yitzabai, it brings the same. Shechu bezin beturim. B'chol shub asham vadai. Nasi mashiach yitzben bezin beturim. That's case number 1. 1 and 2. That's asham taloi and asham vadai. What's the next case? Shmiyas kol. Regarding to hearing the kol, ubita sefasayim the shvua, utumas mikdash v'kadash of the last 3. The 3 of carbon oil of Yeri, the variable carbon. These 3 bezdin beturin nasi mashiach chayavin. Elo she nasi chayav shmias kol v'lo mashiach v'tumas mikdash v'kadash. Kol shubai of Yeri. Case number 4. Any time where a singular person brings an oil of Yeri, nasi ki yitzvei mashiach bezdin beturin. End of Brisa. Asks the Gemara. Was Shitas Rabbi Shimon Hagufa Kasha. This is Shver Minei Ubei Amrit. 3 lines on the bottom. You said Shein Mashiach Chai B'Tumas Mikdash B'Tumas Mikdash V'Uda Pater, which obviously implies that when is the Mashiach Pater? Only Tumas Mikdash V'Kadash. Avol B'Shmias Kol B'Tus V'Sayim. Of course, the dig is that he's Chayiv. But Ema Seifa Kol Shubai Levi Yari Nasik Yitzvei Mashiach Bezdin Peturin. So we see there's another patur of the kain mashuach. Katani mashuach ubezdin turin ma bezdin v'turin mekulu av mashuach patur mekulu. And so ask the Gemara, how do we reconcile that this brisa minei ubei shver? What is the status of the kain mashuach? Says the Gemara as we turn over to Tes Amid Beis Kashyan Ahadadi. So the brisa is a stira minei ubei. Amar Avuna B'Rei Rav Yeshua Lo Kasha Kan B'Dalos Kan B'Dalei Dalos. In the first case where he said the Kain Mashuach will sometimes have a chiyuv. That's where talking about the regular carbon of a dalos. But Kan B'Dalei Dalos will never be chayiv the poor of the poor. Rav Shimon said like Rabbi Kiva B'Chad U'Poligolei B'Chad. So like Rabbi Kiva B'Dalei Dalos. They bought there, but U'Poligolei B'Dalos that Rav Shimon is going to hold. Even though a moment ago we saw will be completely potter. Rav Shimon don't know Klapei Dalos. The Kain Mashuach will yes be chayiv. Ela Shein Kohen Gadol chayiv Achulu. 5 lines down. The Kohen Gadol is not chayiv for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadash. Amar Chizkiya, my time with the Rav Shimon, what's the reason they're saved? V'nechrosa nefesh ahim mitoich ha'kahal, misha karbanei shavel l'kahal. From here we darshan it's only when one's carbon is the same as the kahal, yotza zein shein carbon shavli kahal. And that's the reason why this is going to be a batur. But ask the Gemara if this is true. Mkein nasi nami carbon shavli kahal. Nasi should be the same. Response to Gemara, no, shavli kabar di yom kippurim. The nasi at some level is the same. The kabar of Yom Kippur. Mkein kahanim nami. Loi shavli kahal bekabar di yom kippurim. But the kahanim are not the same. They're comparable to everyone else during the regular mitzvahs of the year. Kulam. Mashiach Nami Yeshav B'Shar Mitzvahs Shana. The Kohen Mishul might be different on Yom Kippur, but it's the same during the year. Elamai Ravoi Machi Mishachata Yishavali Yechidim Umayniu. And who is that? That is going to be the Klal. So Rava comes along, and Rava says, what does it mean by Kahal? With regard to Thomas Mikdash Vikadash, the passing means Mishachet Asai Shavelich Yechidim. Then, and what is that? That is the people of the Kahal. That the pasuk is not talking about Kahal in the colloquial is everyone, but the Yechidim of the Kahal. That's Rava's Chiddush. Rav Elazar and Nasi maybe Sayer says the Gemara Amar Rabbi Yechon Rav Eliezer Ela b'tum aziktir shvikadash avayel v'nemar kares by kibikavua. Since it says kares, like achatas kavua, Amar Rapapa comes along and explains what Rav Yechon just said. Achanam mistavra maskim. Tis I got that al kulukam. Rav talking about everything. Mechti Sayer Nasi ubar meshuach. Bakum yachal achatas kai. Says the Gemara, then the Nasi's Sayer and the Meshuach's Par should be similar to the Yachid that brings a regular carbon chatos. So says the Gemara, Nisni Nami, Mashiach may be Par, Bishmias Kolabitis of Asayim. Then it should have also listed the carbon kain Mashiach in these cases. El midulai katani Mashiach shmamina atomas mikdash v'kadashav kai. We must only be referring to that aver. The Mashiach is going to be Potter, and that's the same as Rabbi Yochanan. Amar le Ravuna Breder Am Nasler Rapapa Mimai Del Rav Elazar Akulu Kai. Maybe Elazar really is going in all the cases. Then Mashiach Savalak Rabbi Kiva. Maybe just Klape, that one didn't hold the Rabbi Akiva. Amar le, Rapapa responds, Rav Akiva mi patale, mi par. So Rav Akiva hold your potter from the par, Rav Akiva only hold your potter from the carbon oil of Yored. V'sulai midi. And there's nothing more, meaning we have to say Rav Elazar is not of this opinion, meaning that he doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rav Yechon, Maider Rav Elazar, Shein Mevi Asham. Elazar is Maider, you don't bring in Asham, Talui. Tani Tana Kamid Rav Shishis. Asham Talui Baal Tumas Vikdash Vikadash. Amar Le, Damar L'chamani holds this Rav Elazar, like we just said. Amar Hayel V'Namar By Karis Kibikavua. Maisi Nasi Sayer Aleha. So the Nasi will bring a Sayer for it. I've Amar Rav Yechon, Maider Rav Elazar, Shein Mevi Asham Talui. You just said you don't bring the Asham Tali. He said, indeed, that is a kasha. Hajjan Allah, Chayra Kain Mashiach. We'll pick it up. That's Chayra Kain Mashiach. The next parak is going to be just Kain Mashiach. Siyata Dishmaya.